The story begins with a teenage boy suddenly waking up inside a dark, violently rattling metal elevator. He has no memory of who he is, where he came from, or how he got there. He only knows that he is terrified. As the elevator, known as the box, comes to a grinding halt, the ceiling opens to reveal a blinding light and a group of teenage boys looking down at him. A rough-looking older boy named Gally jumps down into the box and hauls the new arrival up to the surface. The boy finds himself in the Glade, a massive grassy courtyard enclosed by towering ivy-covered stone walls. He immediately panics and tries to run away, but he trips and falls, prompting laughter from the surrounding crowd. He's approached by Albie, the stern but fair leader of the Gladers, who welcomes him and explains the basic rules of their society. Albie assigns a boy named Newt, his second in command, to show the newcomer around. Newt explains that every boy in the Glade arrived exactly the same way, one new boy every month sent up in the box with supplies, completely stripped of his memories. The newcomer quickly notices massive openings in the stone walls. Newt warns him never to go beyond those doors. Beyond the Glade lies the maze, a colossal, ever-changing labyrinth. Every morning the doors open and a select group of the fastest and strongest boys, known as the runners, venture inside to map the corridors and look for an exit. Every evening the doors slide shut, locking the Gladers inside for their protection. No one has ever survived a night in the maze, as the dark corridors are patrolled by grievers, nightmarish biomechanical monsters that slaughter anything they catch. That night the Gladers hold a massive bonfire to celebrate the new arrival. The boy bonds with a young, chubby Glader named Chuck, who becomes his first real friend. During a rough wrestling match with Gally, the boy hits his head on the ground and suddenly remembers his name, Thomas. The camp cheers, but Thomas's curiosity about the maze only grows stronger. The next day, Thomas is sent into the woods to collect fertilizer. Suddenly, he's attacked by Ben, one of the runners. Ben is pale, aggressive, and clearly out of his mind. The other Gladers rush in to subdue Ben, pulling him off Thomas. Albie explains that Ben was stung by a griever during his run. The sting injects a venom that causes a painful, maddening process called the changing. Because there is no cure, a stung Glader becomes a lethal threat to the camp. That evening, Albie and the keepers forcefully push Ben into the maze just as the doors close, banishing him to his death to protect the group. Determined to understand what is happening, Albie decides to join the lead runner, Minho, to retrace Ben's steps inside the maze the following morning. Thomas and the others wait anxiously all day for their return. As dusk approaches and the heavy stone doors begin to close, Thomas spots Minho dragging an unconscious Albie down the corridor. They're not going to make it. Ignoring the strict rules, Thomas squeezes through the closing doors at the very last second, trapping himself inside the maze with them. Minho is furious, telling Thomas he's just signed his own death warrant. Albie was stung by a griever and night is falling. As mechanical shrieks echo through the walls, Minho panics and runs away to save himself. Thomas refuses to abandon Albie. He uses heavy vines to hoist Albie high up onto the maze wall, hiding him in the ivy. Just as he finishes, a griever rounds the corner, a massive, terrifying amalgamation of fleshy slug-like appendages, metal spider legs, and deadly mechanical stingers. The creature spots Thomas and gives chase. Thomas sprints through the shifting corridors, desperately trying to stay ahead of the monster's snapping claws. He manages to find Minho, and the two team up. As the maze walls begin to shift and close for the night, Thomas devises a reckless plan. He baits the griever into charging at him down a closing corridor. At the last possible second, Thomas and Minho dive out of the way, and the griever is crushed to death between the massive moving walls. The next morning, the Gladers wait solemnly by the doors, expecting to find nothing. To their absolute shock, Thomas and Minho walk out, carrying a heavily injured Albie. Thomas has done the impossible. He survived a night in the maze and killed a griever. While most of the boys treat Thomas like a hero, Gally is furious. He demands that Thomas be punished for breaking the #1 rule of the Glade. A gathering of the keepers is called, and after a heated debate, Newt and Minho overrule Gally. Not only does Thomas avoid punishment, but Minho officially promotes him to the rank of runner. Suddenly, the camp's alarm sounds. The box is coming up again, which is impossible since it only arrives once a month, and Thomas just got there. When they open the elevator, they find a teenage girl unconscious inside. She's holding a note that reads, "She's the last one ever." The boys are stunned, but the shock deepens when the girl briefly wakes up, looks directly at Thomas, calls his name, and then slips into a coma. Thomas swears he doesn't know her, but the other Gladers, especially Gally, become highly suspicious of him. Needing answers, Thomas and Minho venture back into the maze to inspect the crushed Griever. They pry a blinking, cylindrical mechanical device out of the creature's remains. The device bears the acronym WCKD. When they bring it back to the glade, they realize it emits a beeping signal that acts like a key. The next day, they follow the signal deep into Sector 7 of the maze, an area that is supposed to be closed. The device leads them to a cliff edge where it suddenly opens a massive mechanical door. They have finally found a potential way out, which they dub the Griever Hole. Meanwhile, back in the glade, the girl, Teresa, finally wakes up. She climbs up a watchtower and throws rocks at the boys until Thomas comes up to talk to her. She reveals she has fragmented memories of Thomas and that they used to work for the people who put them in the maze. More importantly, she arrived with 2 syringes filled with a blue liquid. Thomas realizes this might be an antidote to the Griever venom, and they quickly administer it to the dying Albie. Albie wakes up from his coma, but the memories returning to him are horrifying. He remembers the outside world, a place ravaged by a solar apocalypse, and he remembers Thomas working alongside the creators of the maze. Before the group can process this revelation, night falls. However, for the first time in Glade history, the massive stone doors do not close. Worse, the doors to all the other sections of the maze open simultaneously. Panic erupts as a dozen Grievers pour into the glade. The monsters tear through the camp, destroying buildings and slaughtering the boys. Thomas, Teresa, Minho, Newt, and Chuck barricade themselves in the council hall, but a Griever breaks through the roof. Albie sacrifices himself to save the others, allowing himself to be taken by the monster so the rest can escape. By the time the Grievers retreat into the maze, half the Gladers are dead and the camp is burning. Gally takes control of the surviving Gladers, blaming Thomas for the massacre. He points out that everything went wrong the moment Thomas arrived. Desperate to unlock his own memories and understand why WCKD put them there, Thomas takes a severed Griever stinger and purposely stings himself. He falls into the agonizing changing and is given the second syringe of the antidote by Teresa. While unconscious, Thomas experiences vivid flashbacks. He sees the world destroyed by solar flares and a deadly virus called the Flare. He sees scientists running tests on immune children. He sees himself and Teresa in pristine white lab coats monitoring the Gladers on computer screens. He realizes the maze was never a prison. It was a brutal testing facility designed to study the brain patterns of immune children pushed to their absolute limits, all to find a cure for the virus. WCKD stands for World Catastrophe Kill Zone Department, and their motto is, WCKD is good. Thomas wakes up and explains the truth to the remaining Gladers. He confesses his past involvement, but insists they can use the Griever Hole to escape. Gally refuses to listen. He has lost his mind to fear and demands that Thomas and Teresa be tied to poles and sacrificed to the Grievers to appease the creators. As Gally prepares the sacrifice, Thomas's loyal friends, Minho, Newt, Chuck, and Frypan, launch a surprise attack, overpowering Gally and his guards. Thomas pleads with the remaining boys to come with him into the maze, arguing that dying out there looking for freedom is better than waiting to be slaughtered in the glade. A large group joins Thomas, but Gally and a few terrified loyalists choose to stay behind, too afraid of what WCKD has waiting for them. The armed group of Gladers charges into the maze, navigating the dark corridors until they reach the Griever Hole. It is heavily guarded by a pack of Grievers. A brutal, chaotic battle ensues. Minho, Newt, and the older boys use makeshift spears and clubs to fight the monsters, suffering heavy casualties. Meanwhile, Thomas and Teresa sprint for the mechanical door, desperately trying to type in an 8-digit passcode based on the sequence of the maze's opening sections. Just as a Griever is about to impale Thomas, Chuck bravely steps in and helps him trigger the door. The heavy blast doors slam shut, crushing the remaining Grievers and locking the surviving Gladers inside a sterile metallic hallway. The group walks forward in stunned silence, eventually entering a massive ruined laboratory. The facility is littered with the dead bodies of scientists and armed guards, all seemingly shot in a massive firefight. The computers are smashed and the equipment is destroyed. Thomas presses a flashing button on a terminal, triggering a pre-recorded video message from a woman named Ava Page, the lead scientist of WCKD. She explains that the sun scorched the Earth, leading to the outbreak of the flare virus, which attacks the brain and turns humans into rabid cannibals. The Gladers are part of an experiment because they possess a natural immunity to the virus. Page claims the experiment was a success, but the WCKD was attacked by a rebel group who opposed their cruel methods. As armed men burst into the video feed behind her, Page seemingly shoots herself in the head, ending the recording. The Gladers are horrified, believing their entire struggle was for nothing and that their rescuers are dead. Suddenly, a door opens and Gally steps into the lab. He is clutching a WCKD pistol and a fresh, swelling griever sting on his neck. Driven completely insane by the venom, Gally tearfully declares that they can never leave WCKD. He raises the gun and points it at Thomas. Minho reacts instantly, hurling a spear directly into Gally's chest. However, Gally manages to pull the trigger as he fell backward. Thomas braces for the impact, but Chuck throws himself in the path of the bullet. Chuck collapses to the floor, bleeding out from a fatal chest wound. Thomas drops to his knees, screaming in agony as he holds his dying friend. He pulls out the small wooden carving Chuck wanted to give back to his parents, weeping as Chuck takes his last breath. Before the group can fully process the tragedy, a team of masked, heavily armed soldiers storms into the laboratory. They forcibly pull a grieving Thomas away from Chuck's body and herd the surviving Gladers out of the facility and into a waiting helicopter. As the helicopter takes off, the Gladers look out the windows. For the first time, they see the true scale of the maze, a massive concrete structure sitting in the middle of a barren, apocalyptic desert wasteland known as the Scorch. The soldiers tell the boys that they are finally safe and that everything will be all right now. However, the final scene reveals that this was all part of the plan. Back in the laboratory, the dead scientists suddenly stand up, wiping fake blood off their clothes. Ava Page steps forward, completely unharmed. She looks at a data screen monitoring the helicopter's trajectory and smiles coldly. She announces to her team that Phase 1 is a complete success. There are more survivors than expected, and it is now time to begin Phase 2.